Flaxborough's parish hall had been arranged with the particular optimism that accompanies charitable endeavours. Folding chairs deployed in hopeful rows, a tea urn that wheezed like an elderly parishioner, and sherry of a colour that promised youth and possessed none. The annual St. Bartholomew's Bell Appeal had drawn its customary congregation of the dutiful and the curious, their presence testimony to that peculiar English virtue of supporting worthy causes through mild social discomfort. Canon Pottle, a man whose natural diffidence was periodically overwhelmed by pastoral obligation, stood before the modest gathering with the expression of someone who had drawn the short straw for public speaking. His audience numbered perhaps 30 souls, distributed among the chairs with the strategic spacing that suggested both community spirit and personal boundaries. Behind him, a display board proclaimed the virtues of bell restoration, with photographs of medieval craftsmanship in modern price, estimates that caused visible wincing among the assembled faithful. Inspector Pubright had arrived precisely at 7:30, not from any particular devotion to ecclesiastical fundraising, but because declining Canon Pottle's invitation would have required more social manoeuvring than attending. He sat without ostentation near the aisle, where he could enjoy both a draught from the door and the edible half of a macaroon, observing the gathering with the detached interest that police work had cultivated in him. The evening's most prominent feature stood beside the stage like a silent sentinel, a life-sized papier-mâché nun, crafted with the earnest enthusiasm that characterized amateur theatrical endeavors. Sister Agnes Vale, the retired district nurse who had volunteered her services for the upcoming heritage pageant, had explained that the figure would represent the legendary Sister Benedicta in the church belfry, providing visitors with one of the town's more colourful historical footnotes. For now, the figure gazed over the hall with impartial devotion, a small tag tied to one sleeve announcing in Mrs. Creek's tidy hand, "Do not touch." Treated so sternly, it naturally invited confidences. "We gather this evening," Canon Pottle began, adjusting his spectacles with the deliberate care of a man buying time, not merely to preserve our heritage, but to ensure that future generations might continue to hear the voice of St. Bartholomew's calling them to worship, to celebration, and to reflection. His voice carried the gentle authority of prepared remarks, warming gradually to his theme of modest contributions toward a modest heritage. Mrs. Platt, occupying the front row with the territorial authority of someone who had claimed that position for every parish event since 1963, nodded with the vigour of the truly committed. Beside her sat Alderman Chubb, whose presence lent the evening a gravity that transcended mere fundraising. His attendance suggested civic duty rather than religious enthusiasm. The donations table near the entrance held the evening's proceeds, a respectable collection of envelopes and cash, crowned by Alderman Chubb's substantial cheque, spread upon its envelope like a sea creature taking the air. Canon Pottle was describing the specific virtues of the tenor bell when it happened. A sound, faint at first, then undeniably distinct, drifted through the open transom from the direction of the churchyard, and, more particularly, from the tower that dominated the evening's educational diagram. It was a whisper, distinctly feminine, carrying the quality of urgent confidence that suggested secrets shared rather than prayers offered. The words themselves remained indistinct, but the tone was unmistakable, intimate, knowing, and somehow reproachful. The effect was immediate and comprehensive. Conversation stopped mid-sentence, teacups stilled against saucers, and heads turned toward the tall windows that faced the churchyard. Mrs. Platt's cup rattled with a sound like castanets, while her small shriek provided an unfortunate counterpoint to the mysterious whisper. Canon Pottle's prepared remarks dissolved into bewildered silence as the whisper continued for perhaps 30 seconds, creating one of those temporal bubbles that unexpected events seem to generate. "Good gracious," murmured Alderman Chubb, his civic composure briefly deserting him. What on earth was that? In the confusion that followed, chairs scraping as people rose to peer through windows, voices rising in speculation and nervous laughter, Canon Pottle attempting to restore order with gentle appeals for calm, the donations table suffered the kind of disruption that charitable events fear most. When attention finally returned to practical matters, the evening's collection had vanished as thoroughly as if it had been blessed into another realm entirely. The silver collection plate lay abandoned, a solitary metallic witness to prosperity's disappearance. Pubright, who had remained seated throughout the commotion, noted several details that others might have missed in their excitement. The immediate reactions revealed much: who looked toward the church, who looked toward each other, and who, perhaps most tellingly, looked toward the floor. More significantly, he observed that the papier-mâché nun had shifted position. No one had seen her move, yet she now leaned at a conspiratorial angle against the door jamb, her wimple tilted as if she had repositioned herself to better hear the whisper from the tower. Sister Agnes insisted she had left the figure perfectly upright. Mrs. Platt blamed a draught, though the evening air was conspicuously still. Pubright studied the tilted wimple and stiff sleeve, noting how the figure now suggested a confidant, inviting an ear and a moment's patience. He kept his observations private, but suspected that the real business of the bell appeal had only just begun. The evening concluded with the kind of determined normalcy that follows unexpected disruption. But the mystery of the whispering nun had already begun to weave itself into Flaxborough's social fabric. By 10 o'clock the following morning, the whispering nun had acquired a biography more comprehensive than most of Flaxborough's living residents. News of the previous evening's peculiar incident travelled through the town's social arteries with the remarkable efficiency that only genuine mystery could inspire, gathering embellishments at each retelling like a snowball, accumulating both substance and momentum during its inevitable descent. At the railway buffet, where morning commuters paused for tea that promised more than it delivered, the whisper had transformed into a sophisticated recording made by technical college students conducting acoustic experiments. Miss Toft, whose custard slices maintained more consistency than her theories, confided to a gentleman with a briefcase that modern youth possessed too much equipment and too little respect for sacred spaces. Her nephew's enrollment at the technical college lent credibility to this interpretation, though he studied plumbing rather than electronics, a detail that seemed irrelevant to supernatural acoustics. Mrs. Creek's temperance boarding house provided a more theatrical interpretation. During the communal breakfast that she supervised with the vigilance of someone who had appointed herself guardian of both morality and marmalade, the whisper had become the voice of a wronged Victorian nun seeking justice for unspecified historical grievances. "Old buildings never forgive," Mrs. Creek declared, applying her duster to both furniture and proposition. "It is my belief that we have awakened a conscience in stone." Sister Agnes Vale, who occupied the front room overlooking the churchyard, listened to this theory with the patient expression of someone accustomed to Mrs. Creek's dramatic tendencies, contributing only that the voice had sounded contemporary rather than historical, a distinction Mrs. Creek dismissed as irrelevant to supernatural manifestations. The hand and scepter offered more skeptical refreshment. During the morning session that attracted those whose schedules permitted early philosophical discussion, the whisper was dismissed as acoustic trickery by someone with too much time and too little sense. This theory found particular favor with Des King, the young electrician whose recent work on the church's bell motor required explanation. "Ancient wiring carries all sorts of sounds," he declared, though his dismissal carried the slightly defensive quality of someone whose proximity to the scene demanded justification. Each retelling revealed as much about the narrator as the event itself. Mrs. Platt, having recovered sufficiently from her shock to hold court at the post office, insisted that the whisper had named certain individuals without specifying whom, creating the delicious possibility that everyone might be implicated while no one could be definitively accused. Her audience received this information with the breathless attention that accompanies truly superior gossip. Lionel Cripps, the antiquarian bookseller whose shop seemed to lean inward with curiosity, offered technical observations about inferior recording equipment while examining a manuscript that may or may not have originated from St. Bartholomew's collection. A whisper travels best along stone and ducting when accompanied by mechanical impetus, he explained to a bewildered customer seeking only a railway timetable. Inferior tape recording is serviceable when the intention is mischief rather than fidelity. His expertise in electronic matters struck some as suspiciously comprehensive for a dealer in old books. The missing donations added practical urgency to supernatural speculation. Alderman Chubb's substantial check had represented the evening's most significant contribution, transforming the mystery from amusing oddity to genuine concern. Canon Pottle, when pressed for details during his morning visit to the bakers, maintained that the police had been quietly informed and expressed complete confidence in their discretion and competence. By midday, the story had acquired additional details that no witness remembered providing. Someone claimed to have seen a light in the belfry, though the church had been locked since evening service. Mrs. Creek confided to selected listeners that her holy sensitivity to malice had detected unquiet spirits in the churchyard for weeks, a revelation that caused Sister Agnes to request additional tea and quiet reflection. The town's reaction revealed its character as clearly as any census. Some residents embraced the mystery with enthusiasm, born of lives containing insufficient excitement, while others dismissed it with skepticism, born of preferring their mysteries fictional and their churches quiet. The missing donations ensured that practical concerns balanced supernatural speculation, creating perfect conditions for sustained community interest. A BBC producer specializing in regional mysteries had already made preliminary inquiries, suggesting the story might provide suitable material for a radio segment on unexplained phenomena in rural England, a possibility that filled Canon Pottle with equal measures of pride and apprehension. As evening approached, Flaxborough had transformed the previous night's brief disruption into mythology worthy of extended discussion. The whispering nun had entered the town's folklore, though the truth remained as elusive as the donations that had vanished during her mysterious appearance. Inspector Pubright, observing this remarkable transformation from mundane incident to community legend, noted with quiet interest how quickly details became opinions, then hardened into recollections of sterling reliability. Inspector Purbright's investigation commenced with the unhurried deliberation that characterized his approach to mysteries both criminal and ecclesiastical. He understood that Flaxborough's residents, like most people confronted with official inquiry, required careful handling. Too much pressure produced defensive silence, while too little suggested insufficient gravity. The art lay in providing conversational rope and allowing speakers to tie their own knots. Canon Pottle received him in the vicarage study, where theological volumes competed with parish folders and a collection of ceramic owls that suggested either hobby or inexplicable accumulation. The canon maintained dignified concern throughout their conversation, adjusting his spectacles with the deliberate care of someone buying time. One hesitates to say theft in relation to charitable giving, he admitted, though his distress was evident. We gather not merely to preserve heritage, but to ensure future generations hear St. Bartholomew's voice. When pressed about access, Canon Pottle confirmed the security arrangements with ecclesiastical precision. There are 3 keys to the belfry. I hold one, Verger Jubb another, and Mr. Shillingforth, our organist, keeps the 3rd for blower access, and the loft. None have been out of our keeping to my knowledge. He paused, adjusting a ceramic owl that appeared to have shifted position. Though one hardly expects criminal interest in medieval masonry and Victorian bell-hanging equipment. Verger Hector Jubb proved more forthcoming, though his testimony carried the particular quality of someone eager to demonstrate professional competence. Encountered in the vestry with broom and air of grievance, he looked faintly resentful that the whisper had occurred on his patch. "I heard it right enough," he declared. "Not at the time. I was fetching cleaning supplies from the sacristy. But earlier there was rustling, costume cloth-like. I said to myself, 'Hector, someone's playing at theatricals what shouldn't.'" Pubright inquired gently about the keys. Jubb patted his pocket with affronted pride. "Here they stay, unless it's church business. Des King, the young electrician, wanted to examine cable for the bell motor last week. I went up with him. Folk don't go alone, not with pigeons and perishables." When Pubright raised an eyebrow, Jubb clarified with grim humour, "Me, sir?" Not as steady on narrow steps as I was, Mrs. Platt provided expansive testimony in her sitting room, where antimacassars created an atmosphere of determined respectability. She offered names in confidence while expressing hope for thorough investigation of certain individuals who might benefit from charitable disruption. Her account proved remarkably detailed for someone claiming startlement beyond coherent listening. "The whisper spoke of secrets and wrongdoing," she declared, though pressed for specifics. Admitted the words had been indistinct, but unmistakably meaningful. She also mentioned observing Sister Agnes adjusting the nun's sleeve before the meeting, noting very competent needlework, though one notices these things. Lionel Cripps received Pubright in his antiquarian bookshop, where dust motes performed adagio in struggling afternoon light. He denied particular interest in St. Bartholomew's questionable medieval reliquary before Pubright mentioned it. 12th century provenance is questionable at best, he explained, handling a leather volume with reverent care. The silverwork suggests competent craftsmanship, regardless of spiritual authenticity. When conversation turned to the whisper, Cripps delivered an unsolicited lecture on recording technology that seemed suspiciously comprehensive for someone specializing in old books. If someone recorded a whisper, it would sound precisely like that. Mediocre portable equipment drags the sibilance. You get papery hiss. Alderstone does the rest. Amateurish but effective. He demonstrated with a small reel-to-reel recorder, claiming purely theoretical interest in preserving oral histories of local significance. Sister Agnes Vale maintained prim rectitude in Mrs. Creek's front parlour, her neatness an argument, and alibi. I should be quite clear. She began before Pubright had settled. The habit is purely theatrical, obtained from county suppliers and made decent through laundering. I positioned the figure precisely upright and did not cause it to eavesdrop. She acknowledged basting the hem higher, so visitors wouldn't trip Sister Benedicta, then added, with professional authority, "One encounters considerable local history through district nursing. Families preserve stories alongside furniture. Professional discretion applies to historical confidences as well as medical ones." Ambrose Shillingforth proved most elusive, requiring rescheduled appointments before agreeing to meet in the church itself. A man of perhaps 55 with particular pallor suggesting indoor pursuits, he maintained his role had been strictly musical. "I provided only a brief prelude before Canon Pottle's address," he explained, fingers trailing unconsciously across organ keys. "Thereafter I retired. Such events require enthusiasm I find difficult to sustain." His knowledge of acoustic properties impressed Pubright considerably. "Sound travels unexpectedly through medieval architecture," Shillingforth observed. "The belfry creates fascinating resonance effects. Whispers can seem to originate from locations quite distant from their actual source." He tapped his music case with two fingers in rhythm that might have been scales or impatience. "The town prefers spectacle to practice, Inspector. It will be anxious to determine that a whisper has done harm." Each interview added layers without providing definitive answers. The missing donations remained absent, the whisper's source mysterious, and the papier-mâché nun continued leaning at her conspiratorial angle. Pubright concluded his preliminary inquiries with satisfaction of having established foundation for detailed investigation, though he suspected truth would prove more complex than any single theory could accommodate. His notebook contained remarks made boldly and others made between words, in Flaxborough. Both varieties proved equally useful. Chief Inspector Larch summoned Pubright to his office with the satisfied air of a man who had successfully reduced an untidy mystery to manageable administrative proportions. Larch preferred crimes that could be filed under headings recognizable to a filing clerk, theft of a thing by a person for reasons that required no footnotes. The whispering nun, unfortunately, had begun breeding adjectives and threatening to spawn a legend. He was determined to prune both before they flowered into something requiring explanation to superiors. "We have our man," Larch announced, consulting notes arranged with the precision of someone who had discovered geometry. Lionel Cripps, antiquarian bookseller, demonstrated financial difficulties, suspicious expertise in mechanical contraptions, and presence at the scene with opportunity. He tapped his pen against a summary that had acquired the authority of repetition. Motive, means, and opportunity, the holy trinity of criminal investigation. The theory arrived fully furnished with supporting testimony. Cripps's unsolicited lecture on recording equipment had been overheard by 2 constables and 1 impatient errand boy seeking directions to the railway station. His shop, everyone agreed, contained enough vintage equipment to outfit a small broadcasting station, though what an antiquarian bookseller required with such apparatus remained diplomatically unexamined. "The man practically demonstrated his guilt," Larch continued. "Technical knowledge combined with financial desperation creates a potent mixture." Councillor Sconshaw, whose civic duties included ensuring that mysteries didn't damage Flaxborough's reputation for quiet respectability, endorsed this interpretation with enthusiasm born of relief. "Cripps has always been peculiar," he declared during an impromptu consultation. "Irregular hours, questionable associates, enthusiasm for equipment that normal people find tedious. The sort of individual who might consider theft a form of scholarly research. His logic possessed the circular perfection of someone who had decided upon guilt and was now collecting evidence to support it." The press. Implications pleased everyone except Pubright. A solution involving an eccentric antiquarian with recording equipment would provide quotable copy without reflecting poorly on church security or community vigilance. Local booksellers' bizarre bell theft suggested human interest rather than administrative failure, while promising closure without lingering questions about competence or oversight. Mrs. Platt, consulted as a character witness, transformed neighbourly observation into criminal intelligence with remarkable efficiency. "He receives parcels at unusual hours and maintains correspondence with suspicious frequency," she reported. "One notices these things when one cares about community standards. His explanations about manuscript authentication always seemed elaborate for someone selling old books to occasional customers. Even Canon Pottle, approached with diplomatic delicacy, acknowledged that Mr. Cripps has shown perhaps excessive interest in church antiquities and agreed that swift resolution would benefit everyone's spiritual equilibrium. His theological training prevented direct accusation, but didn't discourage helpful observations about character and opportunity. The case possessed appealing symmetry. Cripps's eccentricities, previously dismissed as harmless scholarly obsession, now appeared as evidence of criminal temperament. His detailed knowledge of acoustics suggested premeditation rather than academic curiosity. His presence at the Bell Appeal, initially attributed to community spirit, now indicated reconnaissance and opportunity assessment. Pubright listened to this architecture of conclusion with characteristic courtesy, taking notes that might have recorded agreement or merely documented enthusiasm. "Mr. Cripps does present certain advantages as a suspect," he conceded, as though discussing hymn selection. "However, I should appreciate time to examine the physical evidence more thoroughly." doors, keys, the arrangement of furniture, one often finds the most telling details in the most mundane locations. Larch's impatience emerged like steam from a kettle reaching capacity. "What more requires examination, Inspector?" The donations vanished during confusion caused by mysterious whispers. "We have a man with means, motive, and opportunity. Let's not construct a cathedral when a simple chapel will suffice." His metaphor pleased him sufficiently to merit repetition in future briefings. "Indeed, Chief Inspector," Pubright replied mildly. "Though sometimes a chapel conceals foundations more extensive than its modest appearance suggests. A few additional observations, if you please. It wouldn't serve justice to mistake efficiency for accuracy." His request carried the gentle persistence of someone accustomed to administrative impatience but unmoved by it. Councillor Sconshaw worried, allowed that prolonged investigation might encourage unwanted publicity and suggested that decisive action would reassure donors about security arrangements. The subtext was clear. Swift arrest would demonstrate competence, while continued investigation might suggest uncertainty or, worse, complexity requiring explanation. The consensus favored immediate action over further evidence gathering. Cripps, they reasoned, posed no flight risk. Where would an antiquarian bookseller flee? His entire existence was catalogued and shelved in that dusty shop. "We'll have him in custody by evening," Larch declared with satisfaction. Pubright requested 48 hours for routine verification of physical details, a diplomatic phrase that suggested compliance while preserving investigative independence. His colleagues agreed with the reluctance of people confident that additional time would only confirm their conclusions. As afternoon progressed toward evening, Flaxborough's authorities prepared for resolution with the satisfaction of people who had successfully transformed mystery into paperwork. Only Inspector Pubright seemed to suspect that truth might prove less accommodating than administrative convenience required, though he kept such suspicions to himself with characteristic discretion. Inspector Pubright employed his borrowed 48 hours with the methodical thoroughness of someone who understood that truth often resided in the spaces between official statements. While Chief Inspector Larch prepared his case against Lionel Cripps with administrative satisfaction, Pubright returned to St. Bartholomew's, ostensibly for routine verification, but actually to listen to what the building itself might confess. The church, in morning quiet, possessed a different character than it had during the crowded Bell Appeal. Without the distraction of human testimony, objects could speak for themselves, and Pubright had learned to appreciate their particular honesty. He began in the organ loft, where dust settled with proprietary calm, and sheet music lay arranged with the precision of someone who valued order above convenience. Tucked beneath the organist's bench, wrapped in a parish tea towel like something requiring protection, lay a small handbell. The brass showed the patina of age and handling, but what intrigued Pubright was its enforced silence. Someone had removed the clapper, leaving only the metal loop where it should have hung. The tea towel, embroidered with a cheerful Mother's Union design, retained faint warmth despite the morning chill, suggesting recent handling rather than storage. A bell gagged after it's been silenced. Sergeant Love observed when summoned to witness this discovery. "It's a scruple dressed as a precaution," Pubright replied mildly. "When people muffle what needn't sound, there's often a wish to handle it noiselessly anyway." The wooden organ case beside the towel showed shallow scrape marks, as though something metallic had been dragged rather than lifted. More tellingly, pale blue residue had collected along the edge, not chalk for blackboards, but the softer variety tailors employed for marking fabric. Pubright pressed his thumb to the smudge, confirming its texture and recent application. The belfry stairs revealed a continuation of this blue trail. Faint smudges marked the banister at irregular intervals, too deliberate for accident, yet too random for systematic marking. At the landing window, a small accumulation of the powder suggested someone had paused there, perhaps testing sightlines or acoustic properties. In the vestry, Canon Pottle's claim about concluding tea service encountered material contradiction. The knitted cosy on the brown earthenware pot held warmth that confessed recent brewing, while a saucer bore a ring of small crescents, tiny dents where a spoon had been tapped rhythmically, marking time or nervous energy. When Pubright set this beside its twin from the organ loft, the patterns nearly matched, suggesting common use by someone with consistent habits. Someone thinking, he murmured to Love, or counting time, the pageant costume. Examined in better light than the previous evening had afforded, displayed alterations that Sister Agnes had not mentioned. The hem showed recent needlework, not merely raised, as she had claimed, but completely re-stitched with thread that didn't match the original. The work appeared competent but hurried, suggesting last-minute adjustment rather than careful preparation. The blue chalk would explain such emergency tailoring. Sister Agnes, when diplomatically questioned, maintained professional rectitude. "I should be quite clear, Inspector. The habit was delivered in proper condition and required no alteration from me. I am particular about presentation. That needlework is not my handiwork." Her gaze moved to the papier-mâché nun with the expression of someone disclaiming responsibility for a wayward child. Sergeant. Love arrived with information that transformed incongruities into pattern. "The BBC fellow was quite helpful," he reported, consulting notes written in his characteristically careful hand. He'd been recording ambient sound for atmosphere, evening birds, church bells, that sort of thing. The equipment caught more than he expected. The recording, played on portable apparatus in the vestry, revealed layers that human ears had missed during the confusion. Beneath the whisper itself, a small mechanical click preceded the voice by perhaps 3 seconds, metallic, decisive, like a switch or lever engaging. Following this came faint rustling that might have been fabric adjustment, then the whisper with slight echo characteristics that suggested origination from an enclosed space rather than the open belfry witnesses had assumed. Professional opinion. Love continued. "The BBC chap thinks it's a recording played through a small speaker, probably battery-powered. The click would be activation, the rustle positioning or concealment." Pubright examined these discoveries with the satisfaction of someone whose suspicions were being confirmed through observation rather than assumption. The handbell without its clapper suggested a signaling device. Someone could have pulled a string attached to the missing clapper to activate hidden apparatus. The warm tea towel indicated recent handling, while the chalk marks might represent guidance for someone operating in near darkness. The altered costume suggested preparation for human rather than papier-mâché occupation, while the rhythmic saucer dents spoke of someone waiting with nervous energy for a predetermined moment. The timing discrepancy between Canon Pottle's stated tea service conclusion and the cozy's retained heat suggested either faulty memory or deliberate misdirection. These details, individually minor, collectively suggested careful planning rather than spontaneous mischief. Someone had invested considerable thought in creating the Whispering Nun, using the Belle Appeal evening as both opportunity and cover. The question remained, who possessed the knowledge, access, and motivation for such elaborate deception? Pubright catalogued each anomaly in his notebook under a heading he labelled privately "offended details," items that would resent being ignored. Experience had taught him that truth often resided in the accumulation of small contradictions rather than dramatic revelations. Lionel Cripps, whatever his eccentricities, seemed increasingly unlikely to have possessed the detailed knowledge of church routines and acoustic properties that the evidence suggested. As afternoon progressed toward the responsibilities of official inquiry, Pubright reflected that the real culprit moved more freely through St. Bartholomew's than any antiquarian bookseller ever could. The investigation was acquiring precisely the complexity that Chief Inspector Larch had hoped to avoid, though Pubright suspected complexity was exactly what justice required. The investigation's expanding scope revealed Flaxborough's social architecture, with the methodical clarity that sustained inquiry inevitably provided. Pubright understood that in small communities, crime rarely emerged from isolation. It grew from the fertile soil of accumulated grievances, thwarted ambitions, and the peculiar intimacies that proximity imposed upon unwilling neighbours. Mrs. Phoebe Creek, keeper of the Temperance boarding house, occupied a position of strategic importance that extended far beyond providing clean sheets and moral guidance. Her establishment served as an unofficial intelligence centre, where information flowed through thin walls and accumulated in the person of someone who considered eavesdropping a form of pastoral care. "I possess holy sensitivity to malice," she declared when Pubright called to verify residential arrangements, her duster moving with the precision of someone who had perfected the art of cleaning while listening. Both Sister Agnes Vale and Ambrose Shillingforth resided under Mrs. Creek's watchful supervision, providing her with comprehensive knowledge of their movements, visitors, and nocturnal habits. Her strategic position overlooking the churchyard offered excellent surveillance opportunities, while her dedication to spotless common areas required frequent movement through corridors where conversations might be overheard. Someone with such detailed knowledge of residents' routines could easily coordinate activities requiring precise timing and insider information. Des King, the young electrician whose work on the church's bell motor had necessitated repeated key borrowing, proved more forthcoming when approached at his lodgings rather than in public spaces where defensive tendencies flourished. His technical knowledge extended beyond basic wiring to include sound systems, having volunteered for amateur dramatic productions where sound propagation experiments had earned him minor celebrity status. Recent acquisition of expensive tools suggested unexpected income, while his nervous denials about the whisper carried the transparent quality of unskilled deception. "I've done work for Mr. Shillingforth," he admitted when pressed about recent commissions. "Small repair jobs on old recording equipment. Says it's for preserving local musical traditions." His access to both church keys and recording apparatus, combined with financial need and tendency toward nervous compliance with authority figures, positioned him perfectly as technical assistant to more knowledgeable conspirators. Beryl Podmore, the postmistress whose encyclopedic knowledge of local correspondence had made her an unofficial clearinghouse for community intelligence, possessed an almost supernatural ability to discern envelope contents through weight, texture, and handwriting analysis. Her volunteer work with parish committees on secure handling procedures provided legitimate access to donor information, while her passion for postal efficiency masked considerable curiosity about contents and destinations. "One notices patterns in correspondence," she explained with professional discretion. Mr. Shillingforth maintains extensive communication with musical equipment suppliers, while Sister Agnes receives considerable gratitude mail from former patients. Her observations, delivered with postal authority, suggested someone who could coordinate information gathering across multiple sources while maintaining plausible professional justification. Solicitor Mr. Malby Norris, who handled the Belapeel Trust with deliberate legal care, acknowledged that certain irregularities in documentation had necessitated additional verification procedures. When pressed diplomatically, he confirmed that Councillor Sconeshaw's deferred maintenance payments had created temporal complications in church finances, though nothing approaching actual impropriety. These revelations cast the missing donations in different light, perhaps representing an attempt to conceal financial irregularities rather than simple theft. Ambrose Shillingforth's volunteer work at the cottage hospital, wheeling the library trolley through wards and common areas, positioned him to overhear numerous confidences from patients seeking sympathetic ears. "People tell librarians things they wouldn't confess to clergy," observed Matron Hartley when Pubright inquired about volunteer arrangements. This revelation transformed Shillingforth from mere organist into repository of community secrets. While his technical knowledge and church access provided means for exploiting such information, his resentment at being overlooked for a choirmaster in favor of someone with modern musical sensibilities added personal grievance to professional opportunity. When encountered later with his hospital trolley, his fingers tapped the handle with the same rhythmic precision Pubright had noted on the vestry saucer. Tick, 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 a metronome for thoughts carefully left unspoken. Each character harbored motivations that could justify participation in elaborate deception. Councillor Sconshaw desired redirecting appeal funds toward civic centre acoustics improvements. Sister Agnes disapproved of Canon Pottle's modern theological interpretations. Mrs. Creek enjoyed moral authority derived from possessing compromising information. Des King needed steady income and recognition beyond amateur productions. Shillingforth nursed accumulated resentments and comprehensive knowledge of both technical possibilities and human vulnerabilities. The investigation revealed a community where everyone knew considerably more about their neighbours than social convention acknowledged, creating perfect conditions for someone with organising ability and sufficient motivation to orchestrate complex mischief. The Whispering Nun began to appear less like spontaneous supernatural manifestation and more like carefully planned theatre designed to serve multiple purposes simultaneously. Pubright concluded his expanded inquiries with growing certainty that truth lay not in any single motive or individual capability, but in the intersection of several people's knowledge, opportunities, and grievances. The challenge now was determining who possessed both the organising, intelligence, and sufficient motivation to transform Flaxborough's social tensions into criminal conspiracy disguised as ghostly intervention. As evening approached, he reflected that small towns were rather like complicated timepieces, many small mechanisms working in careful coordination. And when one component began keeping different time, the entire apparatus might produce quite unexpected chimes. The Amenities Committee had assembled in Flaxborough Town Hall's committee room with the resigned dedication that municipal governance demanded. Councillor Sconshaw presided over an agenda of stunning ordinariness: bench maintenance in Jubilee Gardens, seasonal bedding arrangements, and the perennial question of dog fouling near the War Memorial. The room's polished table reflected overhead lighting onto framed photographs of former chairmen, their expressions suggesting they had discovered that civic duty consisted largely of discussing drainage while pretending it advanced civilization. Mrs. Podmore prepared minutes with postal precision, while the ancient radiator contributed atmospheric wheezings that might have been mechanical complaint or editorial commentary on proceedings. Inspector Pubright attended as observer rather than participant, having learned that community meetings provided steady trickles of useful imprecision. They had reached the third item: replacement slats for Memorial Garden. Benches, when the whisper emerged from the ventilation. Grill above the clerk's shoulder. Unlike the belfry incident, this voice proved devastatingly specific. It spoke of holiday luncheon companions and expense account irregularities in that same intimate, knowing tone that had disrupted the Bell appeal, but now with surgical precision that transformed embarrassment into catastrophe. The effect was immediate and comprehensive. Councillor Pemberton's dignified composure, maintained through 20 years of municipal service, collapsed like punctured dignity. His complexion assumed the mottled appearance of someone experiencing circulation difficulties as personal. Indiscretions received public airing through supernatural. Ventriloquism. Mrs. Podmore's pen stilled mid-sentence. Sconshaw's gavel remained suspended, and the radiator seemed to wheeze with embarrassed sympathy. "Good Lord," murmured Councillor Hartwell, his sustainable seating presentation forgotten. What on earth was that about holiday companions? In the confusion that followed, chairs scraping as councillors craned toward the ventilation system, urgent whispered consultations about acoustic possibilities, Pemberton's increasingly desperate attempts to suggest technical malfunction. The Bell appeal ledger vanished. from the clerk's credenza where it had been stored for comparison purposes with other charitable documentation. The ledger's disappearance transformed supernatural mischief into practical crisis. The document contained detailed records of donations, pledges, and financial arrangements that several parties preferred confidential. Its absence during official confusion suggested coordination between whoever controlled the whisper and someone with intimate knowledge of municipal filing procedures. This second incident demolished Chief Inspector Larch's convenient theory about Lionel Cripps. The antiquarian bookseller had been confirmed attending a Rotary dinner during the town hall, whisper, delivering a lecture on medieval manuscripts and modern collecting to 23 witnesses who could verify his presence throughout the evening. His alibi possessed the irritating completeness that forced investigators to acknowledge uncomfortable truths about their assumptions. Des King, when questioned about ventilation system access, admitted with transparent nervousness that his electrical work had required examination of ducting and sound propagation possibilities during recent amateur dramatic productions. His knowledge of the town hall's acoustic peculiarities, combined with obvious anxiety about financial matters, positioned him as probable technical assistant to whoever possessed the organizing intelligence behind these carefully timed disruptions. The ventilation connects to the basement workshop, he explained, fidgeting with tools that suggested recent use. Sound travels through metal ducting quite efficiently, especially when amplified by small speakers. Not that I would know about such thing. Personally, his denials carried the quality of someone who had rehearsed explanations without mastering their delivery. The whisper's content proved particularly intriguing. Knowledge of Councillor Pemberton's holiday luncheon companion required access to information few residents possessed, either through direct observation, confidential communication, or the sort of hospital gossip that might reach someone wheeling library trolleys through wards where discretion occasionally succumbed to morphine and loneliness. Councillor Sconeshaw's reaction to the missing ledger suggested more than routine concern about municipal documentation. His immediate inquiries about backup copies and confidential verification procedures indicated anxiety about specific entries rather than general record-keeping. When pressed diplomatically, he mentioned deferred maintenance arrangements and temporal complications in charitable accounting that required professional discretion. The technical sophistication of both whispers suggested someone with comprehensive knowledge of Flaxborough's public buildings. While Des King possessed access and some skill, his demeanor suggested he was more likely instrument than architect of such elaborate mischief. The coordination required timing, technical setup, knowledge of sensitive information, pointed to someone with both organizing intelligence and detailed understanding of community vulnerabilities. Pubright reflected that the second incident served multiple purposes. It demonstrated the whisper's mobility beyond ecclesiastical settings, provided leverage through the missing ledger, and escalated community anxiety by striking at civic governance itself. The Whispering Nun had evolved from supernatural curiosity into systematic campaign of disruption. The timing of both incidents, Bell Appeal and Town Hall, suggested someone with detailed knowledge of community schedules and access to technical equipment. More significantly, the whisper's content indicated comprehensive intelligence gathering that extended beyond casual observation into territory requiring either professional access to confidential information or systematic eavesdropping over extended periods as evening settled over Flaxborough. Two supernatural incidents had transformed into practical problems requiring earthly solutions. The Whispering Nun had acquired mobility, specific knowledge, and apparent agenda, suggesting human agency rather than celestial intervention. The investigation was expanding beyond simple theft into territory that made everyone considerably more uncomfortable than ghostly nuns had managed. Though Pubright suspected the discomfort was precisely what someone intended to achieve, Inspector Pubright retreated to his temporary lodgings as evening settled over Flaxborough, with the particular quietude that followed community disruption. His room at the Crown offered modest comforts, a window overlooking the churchyard, adequate lighting for contemplation, and institutional tea that encouraged reflection rather than enjoyment. He arranged his notebook, the BBC man's recordings, and a pencil sketch of the church layout, then settled into the methodical analysis that complex cases demanded. The town's reaction to supernatural intervention had revealed appetites inversely proportional to Flaxborough's size. What appeared as quiet respectability often concealed hungers for drama, recognition, and the peculiar satisfaction that came from witnessing neighbors' discomfort. The whispering nun had fed these appetites with remarkable efficiency, transforming mundane events into theatre where everyone participated as either audience or unwilling performer. Whispers fascinated him particularly. Unlike accusations which demanded response and invited counter-argument, whispers granted the delicious thrill of confession without the burden of proof or responsibility for action. They created complicity between speaker and listener, suggesting shared knowledge while avoiding commitment to truth. Someone who understood this dynamic could wield considerable influence while maintaining plausible deniability about intentions or accuracy. His mental catalogue of suspects had expanded beyond simple theft to encompass more complex motivations. Councillor Sconshaw possessed both financial anxiety about deferred maintenance payments and genuine desire to redirect Bell Appeal funds toward civic centre acoustics. His reaction to the missing ledger suggested someone with specific entries to conceal, while his municipal position provided access to building plans and meeting schedules that made the town hall whisper possible. Mrs. Creek occupied the strategic centre of Flaxborough's information network. Her boarding house served as unofficial intelligence headquarters, where thin walls and moral vigilance combined to create comprehensive surveillance of residents' activities. Her holy sensitivity to malice provided convenient justification for curiosity, while her position overlooking the churchyard offered excellent observation opportunities. Someone with such detailed knowledge of community secrets could orchestrate considerable mischief while maintaining appearance of righteous concern. Sister Agnes Vale presented intriguing contradictions. Her professional discretion about historical confidences suggested access to information extending beyond medical records into territory that might include financial irregularities or personal indiscretions. Her denial of needlework on the pageant costume conflicted with physical evidence, while her precise positioning of the papier-mâché nun indicated someone comfortable with theatrical arrangement and timing. De King clearly possessed technical knowledge and financial motivation, but his transparent nervousness suggested he was instrument rather than architect of elaborate deception. His access to church keys, ventilation systems, and recording equipment positioned him perfectly as technical assistant to someone with superior organizing, intelligence, and comprehensive understanding of community vulnerabilities. Ambrose Shillingforth emerged as the most compelling possibility. His volunteer work at the cottage hospital positioned him to gather confidential information from patients seeking sympathetic ears. His technical knowledge of acoustics and recording equipment provided means for sophisticated audio manipulation. His resentment at being overlooked for choirmaster added personal grievance to professional opportunity, while his access to church facilities and detailed knowledge of community schedules provided perfect cover for elaborate mischief. The organist's rhythmic finger-tapping observed on both the vestry saucer and hospital trolley handle suggested someone who marked time with nervous precision, perhaps counting beats toward predetermined moments. His claim of retiring early from the Bell Appeal conflicted with evidence of recent tea brewing, while his unsolicited lecture on acoustic properties indicated knowledge extending far beyond musical requirements. The physical evidence supported psychological profiles. The clapperless handbell wrapped in a warm tea towel suggested someone who understood both mechanical requirements and the need for silent operation. The blue tailor's chalk on belfry stairs indicated last-minute costume alterations by someone with access and urgency. The rhythmic dents on the vestry saucer spoke of nervous energy and careful timing. Pubright reflected that the whispering nun served multiple purposes simultaneously, discrediting Canon Pottle's leadership, creating anxiety about church security, providing cover for financial manipulation, and demonstrating technical sophistication while maintaining supernatural plausibility. The coordination required suggested someone with both organizing, intelligence, and comprehensive understanding of community psychology. The investigation had revealed Flaxborough as a community where everyone knew considerably more about their neighbors than social convention acknowledged, creating perfect conditions for someone with sufficient motivation to transform accumulated grievances into systematic campaign of disruption. The challenge lay in determining who possessed both technical capability and psychological insight to orchestrate such elaborate theatre. As he prepared his notes for the following day's inquiries, Pubright considered that someone in Flaxborough had discovered how to commit crime disguised as supernatural intervention, using the community's own curiosities and anxieties as both weapon and shield. It would be a pity, he reflected, if it were all as simple as the simplest man available. Human motives rarely aligned with administrative convenience, and tomorrow would require delicate testing of his emerging theories. Inspector Pubright orchestrated his acoustic survey at St. Bartholomew's with the theatrical precision that complex investigations occasionally demanded. The Tuesday afternoon demonstration, ostensibly designed to reassure the community about church security, would provide excellent cover for testing theories that direct questioning might compromise. Canon Pottle had endorsed the exercise with grateful enthusiasm, viewing any scientific approach to supernatural claims as pastorally beneficial. Sergeant Love arrived first, arranging borrowed recording equipment with deliberate casualness. The church, in afternoon quiet, possessed different acoustic properties than evening gatherings had provided, allowing Pubright to observe reactions without the distraction of community anxiety. His invitation, delivered through ecclesiastical channels, had summoned key figures at staggered intervals for technical consultation and public education. Lionel Cripps appeared precisely at the appointed time, his curiosity overcoming residual nervousness about official attention. Pubright greeted him beside the modest display of recording apparatus, then delivered his first deliberate misdirection. Rather impressive equipment, this valved amplifier system, old-fashioned perhaps, but reliable for acoustic measurement. The TB correction came immediately and with pedantic precision that confirmed Cripps's expertise while revealing his compulsive need to demonstrate knowledge. Transistorized, Inspector, not valved. The frequency response characteristics differ considerably, though both would serve for simple playback applications. His eagerness to provide technical instruction suggested someone more interested in accuracy than concealment, undermining theories about sophisticated deception requiring comprehensive electronic knowledge. Ambrose Shillingforth arrived claiming unavoidable delay due to hospital volunteer responsibilities. His reaction to the equipment proved most revealing, immediate recognition delivered with casual authority rather than defensive explanation. When Pubright repeated the valved technology description, Shillingforth's correction came with gentle precision. Solid state, Inspector. Much more reliable for portable applications. His familiarity with technical specifications extended far beyond musical requirements, into territory that sophisticated audio manipulation would demand. The replica ledger, constructed with distinctive paper fibers visible only under careful examination, lay positioned on the vestry table among other church documents. Pubright observed each visitor's reaction with peripheral attention that missed nothing. Councillor Sconeshaw's gaze lingered with the focused intensity of someone assessing authenticity or searching for specific entries. When conversation turned to flawless financial stewardship and confidence that thorough examination would reveal perfect accuracy, Perspiration appeared despite the afternoon's coolness. Sister Agnes. Vale entered with professional efficiency, her eyes moving immediately to assess the recording equipment before surveying the church interior. Pubright's most delicate test involved mentioning an imaginary witness who claimed to have seen a handbell clapper dangling on string near the organ loft as Dishwell. Agnes's eyes moved toward the loft rather than the belfry, a reaction lasting only seconds but confirming knowledge of actual arrangements rather than supernatural assumptions. King provided transparent nervousness that suggested technical capability without organizing intelligence. His identification of equipment components proved accurate but limited, lacking the comprehensive understanding that complex audio deception would require. When pressed about ventilation system access, his denials carried the quality of unskilled deception rather than criminal sophistication. During tea service, Pubright praised various participants while observing reactions to carefully chosen phrases. Shillingforth's fingers began their characteristic tapping against his teacup, tick, 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 the rhythm matching exactly what had been observed on hospital trolley handles and vestry saucers. The nervous habit marked moments of particular stress, providing behavioral confirmation of involvement in activities requiring precise timing. Sergeant Love, positioned strategically near Mrs. Creek's establishment, contributed the afternoon's most revealing experiment. His carefully planted rumor about a second check from Alderman Chubb, discovered in private correspondence, was designed to test information networks and determine circulation speed through Flaxborough's gossip channels. Within 3 hours, the fictional detail had returned to Canon Pottle from a different source, confirming the boarding house's role as intelligence headquarters and suggesting systematic, rather than casual information gathering. The demonstration concluded with recorded whispers played through concealed speakers, providing scientific explanation for supernatural phenomena while allowing Pubright to observe final reactions. Shillingforth's commentary on placement, timing, and familiar voices revealed expertise extending beyond theoretical knowledge into practical application. His observation that unfamiliar whispers prove less persuasive than familiar cadences describing unfamiliar things suggested someone who had considered the psychological requirements of effective audio deception. As participants departed with expressions of reassurance, Pubright reflected on the afternoon's accumulated evidence. The technical knowledge test had distinguished between pedantic accuracy and practical expertise. The replica ledger had revealed specific anxieties about financial documentation. The planted rumor had confirmed systematic intelligence gathering through Mrs. Creek's network. Most significantly, the combination of nervous habits, technical knowledge, and revealing reactions had crystallized around one individual whose access, opportunity, and capabilities aligned perfectly with the evidence. The Whispering Nun's architect possessed comprehensive understanding of recording technology, detailed knowledge of church facilities and community schedules, systematic access to confidential information, and the organizing intelligence necessary to coordinate complex deception. Tomorrow would require more direct approaches. Though Pubright suspected that Ambrose Shillingforth was already calculating responses to increasingly uncomfortable questions about his remarkable expertise in matters extending far beyond musical accompaniment, the investigation had moved beyond supernatural speculation into territory where human motivations and technical capabilities intersected with criminal opportunity. The acoustic survey had served its purpose, revealing truth through carefully orchestrated observation rather than direct confrontation. Canon Pottle's sitting room had arranged itself with ecclesiastical diplomacy for the afternoon's revelations. Pale light filtered through diamond-paned windows onto theological volumes and ceramic owls that maintained their inexplicable vigil with pastoral patience. The tea service awaited with digestive biscuits that promised modest satisfaction. While participants settled into careful arrangement, Ambrose Shillingforth near the window, Sister Agnes maintaining professional posture. Councillor Sconshaw consulting his watch with municipal anxiety, Des King fidgeting with nervous energy, and Mrs. Creek perched with the territorial authority of someone expecting vindication. Inspector Pubright began without fanfare, understanding that truth approached quietly often proved most persuasive. We gather to discuss the Whispering Nun and her remarkable knowledge of Flaxborough's private affairs, he said with conversational courtesy. The investigation has revealed considerable ingenuity in combining technical capability with psychological insight. The Belfry Whisper, he explained, had originated not from the tower but from a portable tape recorder concealed there and activated by mechanical means. The missing clapper from the handbell in the organ loft had been attached to fishing line, creating simple but effective remote activation. Someone positioned in the organ loft could pull the line, triggering the recorder while remaining safely distant from supernatural manifestation. The tea towel served dual purposes, Pubright continued, observing Shillingforth's fingers begin their characteristic tapping against his teacup. It muffled the sound of handling the clapperless bell while concealing the apparatus afterward. The blue tailor's chalk on the belfry banister provided guidance for someone operating in near darkness. Canon Pottle adjusted his spectacles with deliberate care, but the technical knowledge required considerable, Pubright agreed mildly. The town hall whisper required different approaches but similar principles. The ventilation system provided natural amplification, while Mr. King's electrical work had created access to ducting properties. However, King's transparent nervousness suggested unwitting assistance rather than criminal architecture. Des King's ears coloured appropriately. "I never meant—" "Of course not," Pubright replied with gentle courtesy. "Knowledge travels farther than the body that learned it." The whisper's content proved most revealing. Knowledge of Councillor Pemberton's embarrassing confidences required access to information few residents possessed. Such intelligence gathering might occur through systematic eavesdropping or the sort of hospital gossip that reached someone wheeling library, trolleys through wards where discretion occasionally succumbed to medication and loneliness. Shillingforth's tapping accelerated, as Pubright described the organists, volunteer work positioning him perfectly to collect confidential information from patients seeking sympathetic ears. The missing donations and ledger served coordinated purposes. Beyond simple theft, the funds provided immediate benefit, while the ledger's disappearance concealed Councillor Sconshaw's deferred maintenance irregularities. The costume alterations reveal careful preparation, Pubright observed, noting how nervousness manifested in increasingly rapid finger movements. The hastily restitched hem, marked with tailor's chalk, suggests adjustments to accommodate human rather than papier-mâché occupation. Physical evidence accumulated into comprehensive pattern. The warm vestry teapot and rhythmically dented saucer indicated someone who had waited with nervous energy, marking time toward predetermined moments. The acoustic knowledge demonstrated during yesterday's survey revealed expertise extending far beyond musical requirements. Mrs. Creek's boarding house had served as intelligence headquarters, where thin walls and moral vigilance created comprehensive surveillance. Information gathered through systematic eavesdropping could be supplemented by hospital confidences and coordinated with technical capabilities to create devastating supernatural interventions. The motivation proves as complex as the methodology, Pubright observed, watching composure deteriorate with each accumulated detail. Professional resentment at being overlooked for choirmaster, combined with moral disapproval and financial anxiety about organ maintenance funding. The Whispering Nun served multiple purposes, discrediting current leadership, redirecting charitable funds, demonstrating superior knowledge while maintaining supernatural cover. From his coat pocket, Pubright produced the brass clapper, its loop faintly scored by chord. "This was discovered in your music case during routine examination. Mr. Shillingforth, it matches the handbell from the organ loft precisely. Confronted with irrefutable physical evidence, Shillingforth's denials collapsed into dignified acknowledgement. His technical expertise, church access, systematic intelligence gathering, and comprehensive understanding of community psychology had combined to create elaborate criminal theatre disguised as supernatural intervention. "If I may speak," Shillingforth said, not with defiance but with relief that someone had finally comprehended the architecture of his achievement. "Please." Canon Pottle replied with pastoral gentleness. "I have no taste for theft," Shillingforth explained with characteristic precision. The cheque would have been discovered dramatically when conditions were met. The ledger likewise. No one would have been poorer, only improved. Our organ is neglected while bells receive attention for weddings and Christmas. They do not carry melody. I meant to frighten us into sense." His hands lay quiet now, the nervous tapping finally stilled. "The town worships appearances, Canon. It needed something it could not ignore. A whisper carries farther than a sermon." Canon Pottle received these revelations with pastoral composure, though disappointment was evident. The violation of trust, particularly involving charitable funds, struck at community cooperation that ecclesiastical fundraising required. Pubright rose with characteristic courtesy. "Sergeant Love will attend to practicalities. There will be statements, naturally. Mr. Shillingforth, you will accompany us for further discussion, with counsel if desired." As afternoon progressed toward evening arrangements, Flaxborough's mystery resolved into human dimensions of ambition, resentment, and the peculiar satisfaction derived from demonstrating superior intelligence through elaborate deception. The Whispering Nun had been revealed as sophisticated criminal enterprise, though her architect maintained dignity even in inevitable defeat. Canon Pottle poured tea that no one particularly wanted but everyone accepted with grateful courtesy. Outside, St. Bartholomew's bells maintained their silence, while the organ kept its counsel, awaiting whatever future arrangements justice and forgiveness might provide. Flaxborough absorbed the resolution with characteristic resilience, transforming criminal conspiracy into administrative tidying with the efficiency that small communities employed when legend threatened practical requirements. By evening, Ambrose Shillingforth had departed Mrs. Creek's establishment with dignity intact, his music case closed with finality that left only a small draught of regret behind. The bell appeal resumed under Canon Pottle's interim stewardship, a diplomatic phrase acknowledging both continuity and enhanced oversight. Official minutes underwent ecclesiastical revision, transforming supernatural intervention into acoustic anomalies during charitable proceedings. The missing ledger materialized in Canon Pottle's bicycle basket one dawn, its entries mysteriously reconciled with municipal requirements, allowing quiet declaration that accounts were fully balanced. Alderman Chubb's substantial cheque reappeared through channels requiring no detailed examination, accompanied by a brief note suggesting temporary mislaying during recent confusion. The parish treasurer accepted this resurrection with gratitude and remarks about providence that satisfied both clergy and civic authority. Des King secured steadier employment repairing council radiators, work utilizing his electrical knowledge without requiring access to acoustic systems or ventilation ducts. His transparent nervousness gradually subsided as community attention shifted elsewhere, though he maintained careful distance from amateur dramatic productions and their sound equipment requirements. The experience had taught him valuable lessons about lending technical expertise to questionable enterprises. Sister Agnes Vale withdrew from pageantry responsibilities, applying herself to hospital knitting with ferocious good cheer that produced blankets of military regularity. Her needlework achieved remarkable consistency, suggesting previous costume alterations had represented emergency measures rather than characteristic craftsmanship. She visited Canon Pottle to express regret for the disorder, while recommending that future statues be secured more firmly to their foundations. Mrs. Creek continued vigilant supervision of her boarding house, though claims of holy sensitivity to malice received polite skepticism from new residents. Her strategic position overlooking the churchyard remained valuable, but community awareness of her intelligence-gathering capabilities encouraged more circumspect behavior among those seeking accommodation. She polished banisters with satisfaction of someone who had always suspected modernity would come to no good. Councillor Sconeshaw's deferred maintenance arrangements achieved quiet resolution through negotiated payment schedules satisfying both ecclesiastical and municipal requirements. His subsequent advocacy for civic centre acoustics proceeded through proper channels without supernatural assistance, though progress remained characteristically gradual. The children of Flaxborough regarded St. Bartholomew's belfry with enhanced respect, their supernatural theories proving considerably more colourful than adult versions had managed. The papier-mâché nun was quietly retired to the vestry, where it maintained dignified silence among communion silver and seasonal decorations. The BBC segment aired with tasteful inconclusiveness, praising Flaxborough's rich acoustic heritage while avoiding specific supernatural claims. The producer expressed particular satisfaction with his ambient sound recording, noting atmospheric qualities enhancing the programme's mysterious character. Only those present during the original incident recognized the small mechanical click preceding the whisper, a detail remaining professionally unmentioned but privately appreciated by listeners. With technical knowledge, gossip settled like post-service dust, the story retold with knowing winks rather than fearful shivers. Each narrator added small, verifiable details gleaned from official yet understated explanations. The Whispering Nun entered local folklore as cautionary tale about the intersection of technical knowledge and moral theatre, though most residents preferred their mysteries fictional and their churches predictably silent. Shillingforth's resignation was accepted with pastoral regret and practical relief, creating opportunity for musical leadership that might prove less technically sophisticated but considerably more predictable. His departure before Michaelmas was marked by brief, polite notice in the parish newsletter and distinct absence of farewell gatherings. The cottage hospital expressed gratitude for his library trolley service while understanding his need for alternative volunteer arrangements. Canon Pottle, reviewing the week's events with pastoral satisfaction, reflected that truth had proved more interesting than supernatural speculation, though considerably less quotable for future fundraising appeals. The bell appeal would continue with enhanced security arrangements, while the organ would receive attention through proper channels rather than criminal intervention. Inspector Pubright completed his final paperwork with characteristic thoroughness, filing reports documenting criminal conspiracy while acknowledging the elaborate creativity transforming community grievances into supernatural theatre. His notebook contained a penciled observation, acoustics ethics, followed by a small drawing of a bell without its clapper. When Sergeant Love wondered whether future supernatural incidents might trouble Flaxborough's tranquility, Pubright expressed polite doubt. Mr. Shillingforth possessed an unusual combination of technical knowledge, systematic access to confidential information, and sufficient motivation to orchestrate elaborate deception. Such convergence occurs rarely, thankfully. His desk cleared of supernatural mysteries, Pubright returned to routine investigations involving more mundane criminal enterprises. The tea had achieved its customary temperature, cooling toward disappointment, while afternoon light settled into patterns suggesting evening's approach. Outside, St. Bartholomew's bells maintained dignified silence, though children passing occasionally paused to listen for whispers that never came. Flaxborough had restored its customary quiet order, demonstrating the remarkable human capacity for converting disruption into narrative-serving social harmony. Inspector Pubright smiled faintly as he prepared to depart, noting how successfully the town had transformed mystery into memory. He was rarely wrong in such assessments, particularly regarding the delicate relationship between human nature and administrative convenience.